Hello, it's Mrs. Davis. I am so glad you are here joining me today. You can see by my sign that we are going to be entering into some reading fun. It's January, and here where I live, it's gotten really cold. Not much snow in my area. However, I started thinking because it's been so cold and it's January, I started thinking about one of my favorite authors and illustrators, Jan Brett. Have you ever heard of this famous lady? Well, if you've not, you are in for a treat. And if you have, you're going to continue to enjoy her stories. We're going to read some of her very best works, or at least, in my opinion, my favorites. And I'm excited that you're joining me for this reading fun. Now, I wanted to, before we started launching into her books, because she's written many and illustrated them. She does both. Some of her stories that she's actually written are rewritten. So there's stories that already exist and she just refurbishes them, tweaks them a little bit, adds some different details, kind of maybe changes some things, improves them in her way. Her claim to fame too is definitely illustrating, and that's one thing I love about Jan because I love art and artwork, and I'm always so inspired when someone is brave enough to just try to draw and color and explore that world. Now, Jan has written lots of books. I couldn't even find the total count number. I know it's well over 30. And a lot of her books, many of her books, well, my favorites, take place in colder climates. And the time period for a lot of her stories long ago. And so I kind of like that old style of villages and clothing written in faraway lands, in snowy white places. So I'm excited to share some of her great stories with you. Before we do that, however, I thought it would be fun for us to get to know this author and illustrator just a little bit better. I found this little Scholastic News and it says, "Get to know Jan Brett." And I'm excited to share some information about this author and illustrator. So let's get started. Do you know Jan Brett? You might have read one of her books. She has written and illustrated a lot of them. And you can see this is Jan, and then there's some of her characters. And one thing I love about Jan Brett is that not only does she write stories and illustrate, but she does, even though she's writing fiction stories, she does her research. She finds out about the location, the time period, the clothing, the traditions, the songs, the names of the traditional, and in that time period, the names for people. And I think that is so important. Even if you're doing fiction stories and you want them to feel real and you want us to experience that tradition, that culture, you have to research, you have to study, you have to, a lot of times Jan would travel to these places and experience life in faraway places. So I love that about Jan. I think that's so important. If you're an author, you have to study and gain knowledge so that what you write about can become an experience for your readers. That's excellent. All right, let's continue to get to know Jan. There she is as a child. That's when she was young. This says, when Jan was a little girl, she loved to draw. And one thing I read about her was that as she was learning about books, she wanted to illustrate because she felt like the pages of a book could help you feel like you were actually there and part of it. And so illustrating to her became a way to experience an imaginary place as if it was as a real place. That is powerful. She wanted to be an illustrator when she grew up. And of course, we know an illustrator is a person that draws and colors pictures for books and different things, even ads and different medias that people can see and learn. It says, fun fact, when Jan was little, one of her favorite characters in a book was a hedgehog named Mrs. Tiggy Winkle. That's a funny name. Mrs. Tiggy Winkle. Mrs. Tiggy Winkle was in a book by Beatrix Potter. And you may know one of her books as with a rabbit, Peter Rabbit. And there's Jan as she got older. She's got a winter hat on. She's definitely a winter person. When Jan was older, she went to art school. Well, she wanted to learn to draw and color better. She loved to walk around the art museum near her school. She would stare at the pictures there. And this is the art school or the museum by her art school. So one thing too, if you want to be a writer, an illustrator, it's important for you to get to know some information, techniques, how to do things. So going to school for a specific skill that you want to learn, that's important too. So I love that she travels, she got some knowledge from school, and she continued to work on her craft, which is illustrating. There she is as she was older. Again, traveled. Some of her stories took place not in cold places, but hot places like Africa. It says, soon Jan began to draw and write children's books. Traveling helped her write about different places. For one book, Jan went to Africa. You can see she's meeting up with some elephants. No telling what else she met up with there in Africa. She learned how to draw elephants there. Again, her research, her travels helped her to become familiar with customs, cultures, and to improve on her craft of drawing. It takes Jan about 1 year to do a book. And I know in one of the videos I watched, Jan said that it takes her hours and hours to just illustrate one page. So it's very tedious and expert work. And to her, it's worth it. She works at home. She has her studio there. So she loves taking her time to craft. She makes a draft of each page. So a draft is just a beginning. It's a start to be improved upon. You don't get it right the first time. And that's helpful to me because sometimes I start doing something and I get discouraged. But this really helps encourage me to say, you start with a draft, you look it over, and then you tweak it, you improve it. She thinks about how to make it better. And the finished art is always a little bit different from where you started, and it should be, because where you start is just your beginning. These are some of the characters and illustrations from some of the books that she's written. And again, some of them are retellings of traditional books and folk tales and fairy tales. Look at that bus. That's a book bus. Now Jan is famous. People all across the country want to meet her. Jan takes a big road trip each year to meet her fans. For each trip, her bus gets decorated with the artwork from her newest book. That's cool. I would love to meet Jan. I think that would be awesome. Jan has worked on at this writing 33 books. Her newest one is about a little girl and 3 polar bears. Jan already has ideas about books that she will write next. And of course, this little newspaper is older. Let's see if I can see the date on it. Oh my gosh, this is way old. Telling my age. 2008. You know she's written some more books since then. And then here is Jan, and there's some of her books that she's written. And then on the back, it just shows a little timeline, Jan Brett timeline. December 1st, 1949, she's born. And then as time goes on, 1968 to 1969, she goes to art school for about 1 year. And then 2007, newest book comes out. So we're in 2024. So I'm sure that she's written and illustrated several more. So this had her at 33 books. So you know she's way past that. I did try to look that up to see how many books that she's written up to this point. And I couldn't get an exact number, but it was definitely in the 40s now. So I think it's safe to say that she's way above 33 books. I just want to show you a few of her books that I have. And since I've been thinking about our reading time together, I went ahead and ordered a few more. Here are just a few. Here's some cold books. Who's That Knocking on Christmas Eve? She has a lot of Christmas books that have to do with Christmas and cold and reindeer, and this one. And then this is one of my favorites that we are going to read together, The Mitten, which takes place in a very cold climate, Ukraine, and it's written long ago. That's a fun one. Gingerbread Friends. Even though Christmas is over, gingerbread is always in style, no matter what time of the year it is. This is not really a Christmas story, but I think of gingerbread when I think of Christmas. This cute little character is definitely mischievous and fun. And the first book before this one was The Gingerbread Baby, which I thought I had in my collection, but I don't, so I'm ordering it. It's on its way right now. Town Mouse and Country Mouse, which is a fairy tale that she's retold. That's a fun one. And then one of her, she does have a little hedgehog at her house, or she did, Hedgie. So she's written a lot of books, and I even found this paper where she's gonna, when we read some Hedgie stories, we'll figure out how to draw Hedgie. That will be fun. In several of her books, Hedgie is the character. Hedgie blasts off. So these are just a few of the books that I have in my collection, and I have been busily, crazily ordering some more because it's just inspired me to get back to enjoying some wonderful children's books and sharing them with you. So I want you to join me for some fun Jan Brett stories. All right, let's cozy up. You might need a blanket and some hot chocolate, but let's enjoy Jan Brett and her chilly adventures, maybe some hot adventures too if we head to Africa. And I'll see you real soon.